The morning sunlight poured through the vast glass walls of the main design showroom at Forrester Creations, illuminating rows of mannequins dressed in bold silhouettes and flowing fabrics that represented the company's newest creative direction. The room had been carefully prepared for what was meant to be a pivotal moment for the fashion house. Executives, designers, assistants, and senior staff filled the space with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. It was not merely another presentation of sketches or garments. This was the debut of a collection that many believed could reshape the creative identity of the company's next generation. At the center of the room stood Dylan. He had spent months preparing for this moment, pouring every ounce of his creative energy into a collection that was meant to prove something not only to the company but also to himself. The past year had not been kind to him. Rumors, whispers, and unresolved questions had followed him through the halls of the fashion house, often resurfacing whenever the name Luna was mentioned. The accident that had once threatened to derail both of their lives still lingered like a shadow over his career. Some believed he had been responsible. Others suspected there was more to the story. But regardless of the truth, the incident had left a mark on his reputation. Today, Dylan intended to reclaim his narrative. Standing before the assembled executives, he exuded a quiet confidence that immediately commanded attention. His voice carried clearly through the showroom as he began explaining the philosophy behind the collection. He spoke about balance between heritage and innovation, about honoring the legacy of the fashion house while pushing its creative boundaries forward. The garments displayed around the room reflected that vision perfectly. Elegant tailoring combined with bold textures and unexpected structural elements that hinted at a daring future for the brand. Among the executives watching him were Ridge Forrester and Steffi Forrester Finnegan, both of whom studied the designs with the intense scrutiny that had defined the Forrester leadership for decades. Ridge, in particular, watched Dylan with a mixture of professional curiosity and cautious optimism. The young designer's ideas carried a spark that reminded him of the early days of the company, when creativity had been driven by passion rather than corporate calculation. As Dylan finished presenting the final look in the collection, a murmur of approval rippled through the room. Several executives exchanged impressed glances. Even those who had approached the presentation with skepticism could not deny the strength of the work they had just seen. For a brief moment, it seemed as though Dylan had succeeded. But then the doors of the showroom opened. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Ivy Forrester stepped inside. Her entrance carried the unmistakable confidence of someone who believed they controlled the next chapter of the story unfolding in the room. Dressed impeccably and holding a sleek tablet in her hand, she walked forward with an air of calm satisfaction that immediately drew attention from everyone present. Her eyes fixed on Dylan. The faint smile on her lips suggested she had been waiting for this moment. The room fell quiet as Ivy reached the center of the showroom floor. She paused deliberately, allowing the silence to stretch long enough for everyone to notice the tension in her posture. Then she spoke. Her voice carried across the room with deliberate clarity as she announced that before anyone celebrated Dylan's achievements, there was something the company deserved to see. Something the company deserved to know. Ridge frowned slightly, sensing trouble immediately. He had seen enough corporate confrontations to recognize when someone was preparing to detonate a scandal in public. Ivy lifted the tablet in her hand. With a few quick taps, she projected a video onto the large presentation screen mounted behind the display mannequins. The footage that appeared was grainy, clearly recorded years earlier. It showed a chaotic scene, flashing lights, emergency responders, and the aftermath of a car accident that had once dominated headlines. The vehicle involved belonged to Dylan. Another figure in the video was unmistakably Luna. The room filled with murmurs. Many employees remembered the incident vaguely, but few had ever seen the raw footage. Ivy's voice rose above the whispers as she narrated what the audience was watching. According to her, the video proved that Dylan's reckless actions had caused the accident that nearly destroyed Luna's life. Her words were sharp, deliberate, and devastating. The implication was clear. The talented designer standing proudly before the company only moments earlier was not the visionary he claimed to be. He was a liability. Someone whose past actions had endangered others and whose reputation should never have been rehabilitated. As the video ended, Ivy turned toward the audience with a triumphant expression. She believed she had just destroyed Dylan's career. Across the room, eyes turned toward him. Some expressions showed confusion. Others revealed discomfort or suspicion. The accusation hung in the air like a dark cloud, threatening to erase the admiration that had filled the room minutes earlier. But Dylan did not panic. Instead, he stepped forward calmly. His voice, when he spoke, carried a steady authority that surprised many people in the room. He thanked Ivy for sharing the footage. Then he explained that she had made a very serious mistake. The accident, he said, had never been as simple as it appeared. Ivy's smile faltered slightly. Dylan turned toward the presentation screen and requested that the technical team display another video file. A brief moment of confusion passed among the staff operating the equipment. But soon the screen flickered to life again. This footage looked different. Unlike the chaotic accident video Ivy had shown, this one appeared to be surveillance footage recorded in a parking garage several hours before the crash. The image showed Dylan's car. Then another figure entered the frame. The entire room leaned forward as the camera captured the unmistakable silhouette of Ivy. Approaching the vehicle cautiously, she looked around to ensure no one was watching. Then she crouched beside the rear wheel. The footage zoomed closer. Her hand moved deliberately toward the braking mechanism. Within seconds the truth became horrifyingly clear. Ivy had tampered with the brakes. A stunned silence swept across the showroom. No one spoke. No one even moved. The implications of what they had just witnessed were staggering. The accident that had nearly destroyed Dylan and Luna had not been caused by recklessness or bad luck. It had been sabotage. The camera footage ended. For several seconds the only sound in the room was the faint hum of the projector cooling down. Ivy stood frozen. The tablet slipped from her hands and clattered against the polished floor. The sound echoing through the silent showroom like the final crack in a carefully constructed illusion. Her face drained of color as she realized the situation had reversed completely. Moments earlier she had believed she was exposing Dylan as a fraud. Instead, she had exposed herself. Every pair of eyes in the room now looked at her with a mixture of shock and disgust. Ridge's reaction was immediate. The normally composed leader of the Forrester Empire stepped forward with visible fury burning in his expression. Betrayal was something the company had faced before, but sabotage that endangered lives crossed a line he would never tolerate. He ordered security to enter the room immediately. 2 uniformed guards appeared within seconds, their presence transforming the tense atmosphere into something even heavier. Ridge's voice carried the unmistakable authority of someone who had reached an irreversible decision. Ivy Forrester was terminated from the company effective immediately. Furthermore, he declared that the company would cooperate fully with law enforcement in pursuing criminal charges related to the brake tampering. The words hit Ivy like physical blows. Her carefully crafted composure shattered completely. She tried to speak, tried to defend herself, but the evidence projected moments earlier had erased any possibility of denial. Security approached her quietly. Across the room, Luna stepped forward through the stunned crowd. Her eyes were filled with emotion as she reached Dylan. For months she had carried the burden of uncertainty surrounding the accident, never fully able to clear the shadow hanging over both of them. Now the truth had finally been revealed. She embraced him with visible relief. Dylan exhaled slowly, the tension he had carried for so long finally beginning to release. The vindication he had hoped for had arrived, though not without exposing just how far Ivy had been willing to go in pursuit of revenge. As security escorted Ivy toward the exit, she avoided the gaze of everyone in the room. The humiliation was complete. The plan she had believed would destroy Dylan had instead destroyed her own reputation. When the doors closed behind her, the showroom remained eerily quiet. The company had just witnessed one of the most shocking betrayals in its history. And though justice had finally been served, the emotional aftermath would linger long after the room emptied and the lights dimmed. For Dylan, however, one truth had finally become undeniable. The past that once threatened to define him had been exposed for what it truly was. A lie built by someone who had underestimated the power of the truth. The press conference at Forrester Creations had been scheduled as a moment of reassurance. A carefully orchestrated event meant to calm investors, reassure the fashion industry, and restore the fragile balance of power that had begun to fracture after the growing controversy surrounding Eric Forrester's designs. For days the scandal had been spreading across Los Angeles like a slow-moving wildfire. Rumors had multiplied in boardrooms, media outlets, and private conversations among fashion insiders who had long admired the Forrester legacy. Some believed the dispute over Eric's designs was simply another chapter in the long rivalry between powerful families. Others suspected something deeper, something that threatened the reputation of a fashion empire built over generations. Inside the grand press hall of Forrester Creations, the tension was already palpable long before the cameras began flashing. Rows of journalists sat behind polished tables, microphones positioned carefully in front of them, while photographers prepared their lenses for what they expected to be a dramatic confrontation between 2 of the most recognizable women in the fashion world. Bright studio lights illuminated the stage where the executives of Forrester Creations were about to address the controversy directly. The air felt thick with anticipation. At the center of the stage stood Brooke Logan, her posture strong and composed, though her eyes revealed the simmering anger she had been trying to contain for days. Brooke had spent decades navigating the turbulent waters of both the fashion industry and the complicated emotional ties that bound the Logan and Forrester families together. She understood better than most people that loyalty, ambition, and betrayal often existed side by side in the world she inhabited. Today, however, her patience had reached its limit. Across the stage from her stood Katie Logan, equally aware that the situation had reached a breaking point. The tension between the sisters had been building since the moment Eric's designs became the center of public debate. Katie had never expected the disagreement to escalate into such a public confrontation. Yet circumstances had forced both of them into a position where silence was no longer possible. The cameras began flashing as the press conference officially started. Questions flew across the room almost immediately. Journalists demanded answers about the ownership of Eric's designs, about the rumors of unauthorized use, about whether the controversy represented a deeper conflict within the powerful families behind the brand. For a moment, Brooke attempted to maintain the calm professionalism that had defined her public image for years. But the weight of the accusations, combined with the fear that Eric's legacy might be permanently damaged, pushed her past the point of restraint. Her voice rose sharply as she turned toward Katie. She accused her sister of betraying the trust that had defined their family for decades. According to Brooke, Katie's decisions regarding the designs had not only created legal complications but had also risked tarnishing Eric's reputation as one of the most respected designers in the history of fashion. The words echoed across the room, amplified by microphones and captured instantly by dozens of cameras. Katie stiffened as the accusation landed. She had known Brooke would be angry, but hearing the criticism delivered in front of an international press audience made the moment far more painful than she had anticipated. Katie quickly attempted to defend herself, explaining that the situation surrounding the designs was far more complicated than Brooke was presenting. She insisted that she had never intended to harm Eric or undermine the Forrester legacy. From her perspective, the decisions she had made were based on legal interpretations of ownership agreements that had been misunderstood by outsiders. But the explanation did little to calm Brooke's fury. Their voices began to overlap, each woman speaking with growing intensity as the cameras continued to flash around them. The press conference had transformed into something far more chaotic than anyone had planned. Across the stage, Eric Forrester sat quietly, watching the argument unfold with visible exhaustion. The founder of the fashion empire had seen countless conflicts during his lifetime. Yet witnessing the dispute between two women who had once been united as family was deeply unsettling. Ridge stood nearby, his expression tense as he monitored the escalating confrontation. As Eric's son and one of the leading figures of the company, Ridge understood that the press conference was rapidly slipping out of control. Every raised voice, every accusation, threatened to deepen the crisis already surrounding the brand. Just as he prepared to intervene, something unexpected happened. The large doors at the back of the press hall suddenly swung open. At first the movement drew little attention. Many people assumed another late-arriving journalist had entered the room. But within seconds, the quiet disruption turned into something far more dramatic. A woman stepped through the doorway with a presence that immediately captured the attention of everyone inside. She was dressed elegantly in a tailored black coat that suggested wealth and refinement. Yet there was something unmistakably intense in her expression. Her eyes carried a mixture of determination and resentment that seemed almost electric under the bright lights of the room. She walked forward without hesitation, her heels echoing sharply against the marble floor as journalists turned in their seats to watch her approach. Security guards exchanged uncertain glances but hesitated to intervene, unsure whether the woman had legitimate business with the company. The room gradually fell silent. Brooke and Katie both turned toward the unexpected intruder, their argument momentarily forgotten. The woman stopped near the center of the press hall, her gaze fixed directly on Eric. For several seconds she said nothing. The tension became almost unbearable. Then she spoke. Her voice was steady but filled with a raw emotional intensity that immediately captured the attention of every person in the room. She announced that her name was Isabella. And then she revealed the statement that would send shockwaves through the entire building. She was Eric Forrester's daughter. The words landed like a thunderclap. Gasps erupted among the journalists as cameras swung wildly toward Eric, Ridge, Brooke, and Katie. The room exploded with flashing lights as reporters realized they were witnessing something far more explosive than a corporate dispute. Eric's face drained of color. For a moment he looked as though he might speak, as though some explanation or denial might emerge from his lips. But instead his knees suddenly buckled beneath him. He collapsed. The founder of Forrester Creations fell to the floor before anyone could react. Ridge rushed forward immediately, dropping beside his father as panic rippled through the room. Brooke and Katie stood frozen in place, their earlier argument completely erased by the horrifying sight unfolding before them. Medical staff who had been stationed nearby during the press event rushed forward to assist Eric, quickly assessing his condition as the room descended into chaos. Reporters shouted questions from every direction. Security personnel attempted to clear space around the fallen designer as paramedics were called. But the emotional shock of Isabella's declaration had already spread through the room like a tidal wave. Brooke stared at the mysterious woman in disbelief, her mind struggling to comprehend the claim she had just heard. For decades she had been part of the Forrester family's inner circle. She believed she knew the major chapters of Eric's life, the triumphs and heartbreaks that had shaped him into the man he had become. Yet this woman was claiming to be his daughter. A daughter no one had ever heard of. Katie looked equally stunned. The conflict between her and Brooke suddenly felt insignificant compared to the possibility that the Forrester family might be hiding an entirely unknown branch of its lineage. For a brief moment, the sisters locked eyes. The hostility between them softened slightly as they realized the situation now threatened something far greater than their disagreement over Eric's designs. The future of Forrester Creations itself was suddenly uncertain. Meanwhile, Isabella remained standing calmly amid the chaos she had created. Her expression did not show fear or hesitation. Instead, there was a strange confidence in the way she held herself, as if she had been preparing for this moment for years. When reporters began shouting questions at her, she raised her hand slightly to silence them. She explained that her existence was the result of a secret romance Eric had experienced decades earlier while traveling in Italy during the early years of building his fashion empire. According to Isabella, the relationship had been brief but passionate, and the woman Eric had loved during that time had given birth to a child he never knew existed. That child was her. The room erupted with renewed disbelief. Ridge stood slowly, his expression darkening as he turned toward the woman claiming to be his father's daughter. Every instinct inside him demanded that he protect the Forrester family from what could easily be a calculated attempt to exploit their wealth and influence. His voice was sharp as he demanded proof. How could anyone expect them to believe such an extraordinary story without evidence? Isabella met his challenge calmly. She explained that she possessed documentation confirming her lineage, records, letters, and even genetic evidence that could verify her claim. She insisted that she had not come to destroy the family but to claim the recognition and inheritance she believed was rightfully hers. The mention of inheritance sent a new wave of tension through the room. Forrester Creations was not merely a fashion house. It was a global empire worth billions, built on decades of artistic brilliance and business acumen. If Isabella's claim proved legitimate, the implications for the company's ownership structure could be enormous. Brooke and Katie exchanged another uneasy glance. Moments earlier they had been locked in a bitter argument about Eric's designs. Now the entire future of the company, and the vast fortune tied to the Forrester name, appeared to be at risk. As paramedics carefully lifted Eric onto a stretcher, Ridge remained standing near the stage, his eyes fixed on Isabella with growing suspicion. He had spent his entire life protecting the Forrester legacy, and he was not about to allow a stranger to threaten it without a fight. Yet even as he questioned her motives, a troubling thought crept into his mind. Eric had indeed spent time in Italy during the early years of building his career. Those trips had been filled with mystery and romantic rumors that no one had ever fully confirmed. Could it be possible? Could the woman standing in front of them truly be his sister? The ambulance doors closed outside as Eric was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. Inside the press hall, the chaos slowly began to settle. Reporters continued to whisper urgently among themselves, already imagining the headlines that would dominate tomorrow's news. Ridge watched Isabella carefully as security escorted most of the press out of the room. For a moment their eyes met. A faint smile appeared on her lips. It was not the smile of someone frightened by confrontation. It was the smile of someone who knew she had just changed the course of history. In her hand she held an old photograph, its edges worn and faded by time. Though the image was blurred, one detail was unmistakable. The young man standing beside a beautiful Italian woman in the photograph was unmistakably Eric Forrester. And as the episode ended, Isabella looked down at the photograph with a mysterious expression, as though it contained even more secrets waiting to be revealed.